Week 3 of lockdown. How are you all holding up? I think I've baked just about everything I can think of, and now I've just decided to come outside and do a little bit of creative work. I'm in need of your opinion. And so I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pour yourself a cup of tea or whatever else it is that you're drinking this time of day. And spend a little time chatting with me. Write your story. Write the story of your life. Do people ever tell you that? For the past 20 years, I've been hearing it quite a lot. And I always ask people in return, who would care about my life? What would I write about? Where would I start? I don't know. How about you? Have you ever written your story? This seemed like a really good time to sit down and write something. So I'm thinking about it. And so I guess I would really enjoy your opinion, maybe your feedback, maybe some questions. I was trying to figure out, where would you start? Where do you start when you write your story? Do you start now and reflect backwards? Do you start from the beginning and write the whole thing? I started that and I thought, that sounds kind of boring. And then I decided, let me just go back as far as I can remember something in my childhood. I'll start there. So I started jotting things down. For instance, at age 4, I remember hearing the story about my mom sitting next to Johnny Mathis at a band table while my dad was playing on stage. He was a jazz piano player. And my mom was like really pregnant at the time. And sitting next to Johnny Mathis, who wasn't famous then in the 50s and certainly became famous, my mother decided that it was time for her water to break while sitting right next to him. Imagine his shock. Good-looking man, beautiful artist, living sort of a discreet gay life. I'm sure that my mother's explosion solidified the fact that he's gonna stay in a gay life. I remember that story, and my sister was born that night. And then I go back and I remember other stories about my strange childhood, filled with lots of stage people, entertainers, musicians, artists. I guess I never thought it was unusual growing up because that was my life. I guess we never think our own lives are unusual until we listen to other people's stories and we realize they're either unusual or our lives are just weird. And sometimes I think my life was weird, and maybe that's why people ask me to write my story. And so I think back, what was the next thing I remembered? And I can remember being a little girl in the dressing room with a bunch of gorgeous women back in the 50s. Hair, makeup, gorgeous clothes, everything glittered, high heels clattered across the floor. And that left an impression on me. I thought, wow, these are beautiful women. And when I grow up, I want to dress like they do. Well, then I grew up. And I started going through family photos with my dad playing piano, and apparently these girls that I saw in the dressing room were strippers. Yep, he was a piano player and they were strippers. Look at that. Now, who would find that interesting? There's my dad, and there's a stripper. A dancer, excuse me. A dancer, a performer. Back then it was strip club. And I'm down in the dressing room. Her note to my dad: cover your ears if you're a Pollyanna, because you're not gonna like this. To Pussyhead, you're too much. Her name, 1957. And then I found this one. Really gorgeous woman. And it was just to Bob, my father, best wishes. So, here I am, 4, 5 years old, and I see these gorgeous women. I didn't think anything of it. It left an impression on me. I also thought it was normal for families to have jam sessions, music in their house every Sunday. Oh, some Sundays we went to church. Usually it was during the holidays, and it was usually in DC, but we didn't live in DC. So it was a big deal for us to drive into DC to go to church. So Sundays were jam session day at our house. Our house, let me tell you just a little bit about our house. We lived in a 3-room shack across from a river in a small little sleepy village in Maryland. My mother and father grew up in Washington, D.C. My dad went to college there, my mother grew up there. That was where their life was, their relatives, their friends. And then my father decided it was time to move into a home because they started having children, me being the first. And so he found this house out in the countryside in Maryland. 3 rooms. I sometimes remember the toilet didn't flush very well, or it filled the backyard up because we were below sea level. But they paid $2,000 for that house. And he moved my mother out there. And I think that was the beginning of depression for her, because she lost all her friends. She wasn't welcomed into this little town where they moved. And that's a story I'll tell you about later, because my mother didn't appear to be white. And this was a very white little village. And my dad was white, so he fit in. But we'll get back to that story. Sundays were jam session day. All my dad's friends that he played with in DC would come out to the house. It was an escape for them. They thought it was great. They thought, wow, this is a place in the countryside. Let's get away from DC and let's jam. Now, of course, we had a piano in our house. In a 3-room house, we had a baby grand piano. That was the first thing that probably got moved in. I didn't know it then, but the friends of my father who came were the most colorful, eclectic group of artists you could find anywhere. In fact, many of them went on to become celebrities later in life. And I didn't know that then. I just thought this is what people did on Sunday. My dad, being the piano player, was also an arranger of music, composer. And some of his friends that he would play with at a club in DC were Dizzy Gillespie. Yeah, Dizzy Gillespie. Art Blakey. Billy Eckstine. They were probably around 20 years old. And there you have Dizzy Gillespie. There's my dad, Art Blakey, Billy Eckstine are in the back, and they all signed it to my dad. To arranger, scholar, and a gentleman, your boy Diz. My dad didn't go on to become a celebrity. He and my mom had several more children. 4 of us, 4 girls. And my dad didn't think that that was a good lifestyle for him to go on the road, which is what he would have had to do if he was going to play. One town after another, one city after another. I've been watching a television episode while we're on lockdown. Maybe you've seen it. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And it reminds me so much of those years when I was growing up. The style, the clothes, the hair, the makeup. But she eventually went on the road and had to leave her kids. And that's what my dad would have had to do. And he chose not to. So he became a music teacher in public schools. And his life, I guess for him, seemed small because he didn't get to pursue his career. So that's as far back as I remember, or at least that's where my stories sort of start. Who would be interested? Who would find my life interesting? I'm not a writer. I'm a storyteller though. I was a hairdresser for 40 years. And when you stand behind a salon chair, you and your clients have this sort of an intimate, private rapport. They share their secrets with you, their stories, their woes. They'll tell you things sometimes they won't tell their shrink. And they ask me questions. And they would prompt me to tell my stories. And that was where I started hearing, you need to write these down. You need to tell these stories. But the truth is, I can't just sit down and write. I'm not a writer. I would need someone to prompt me, ask me questions, and then I could tell you stories. In fact, when I retired from 40 years of being a hairdresser, I moved to Brazil for a couple of years. That's another long story. We'll get to that one. And while I was there for 3 years, I started remembering all the stories my clients would tell me, things that we chatted about, or gossip stories. So I wrote them down. I created a book. I published it on Amazon. Yes, you can find it on Amazon. Confessions of a Hairdresser. Gossip stories. Storytelling. I can do that. But I'm 67 years old. And what I just told you was all the way back when I was 4 and maybe 6. That's a lot of stories to tell in the middle. I have 4 gorgeous children by 4 different situations. Every one of them is a story in and of itself. Do I tell those stories? One of them I was threatened to be killed if I told it. Not so unlike Crazy Rich Asians. That was one of my stories. Only someone beat me to it. I don't know. Should I tell my story? I don't know. If nothing else, maybe during this lockdown time. God only knows how long that's going to be. It'll give me something creative to do, something to remember, maybe an opportunity to really embrace my life and embrace the beautiful blessings that I've had in it and not feel quite so despondent about where we are right now, because this is going to pass. I know that. Let's just hope that we all get through this healthy and alive. So, should I write my story? Are you writing a story? Maybe you have a story to tell and now would be a good time for you to write. I don't know. What do you think? I would love to hear what you think. But until then, I'm going to enjoy the muffin I made this morning, because though I left doing hair for all the beautiful years that I had a chance to do it, I stepped into something else I'll tell you about later, which is food and film. And the food part of my life connects me to many beautiful stories with my mom. And music, yes, I sang, I played flute. In fact, back in those days when my dad would have his jam sessions at the house, and he would have bass players and trumpet players and sax players and drummers, but sometimes when the drummer didn't show up or he couldn't come, my dad taught me the basic rhythm so that I could sit there with with the drum, the snare, the cymbal, and just keep a basic beat so the guys could play. So yes, music is part of my life too. But food and filmmaking, storytelling, visual storytelling is what I am loving. So I don't know. Should I write my story, or should I just keep on sharing my recipes? Or should I combine a complete lifestyle that encompasses all the crazy experiences I've had in my life? I would love your feedback. I would really like your opinion. By the way, this muffin, it's called a hodgepodge muffin. You know why? Because we're all in lockdown. God only knows what we've got in our pantry and at our refrigerator. So I went to my pantry and I pulled out all the things I like, and it's healthy. Yes, it is. It's healthy. It's oatmeal and it's walnuts. There's no flour. There's no milk. And that's what I'm going to sit here and enjoy eating and sipping on some tea. And I'm going to wait to hear from you.